It says it's now streaming live on YouTube. Are we good to go then?
We're good to go now. Thanks for your
Excellent.
patience on that.
Great. Thank you for everyone's patience there. I call this meeting of the Subdivision and Development Appeal Board to order. My name is Sean Krausert, and I'll be the chair for this hearing. All questions and comments shall be directed through the chair. The board members hearing this appeal are Rochelle Harding, Harry Scott, Greg Birch, and Vi Sanford, and myself. The clerk for this hearing is Jolene Noel. Now, Madam Clerk, are there any additions, deletions, or changes to the agenda as provided?
No, there are not.
Okay, so I would turn to the board members, and I would like to make a motion to adopt the agenda as circulated. All in favor? That's passed unanimously. I'd like to introduce the members of town administration that are present for this hearing, and they are Nathan Gravel, Lauren Miller, and Jane Dean. And the appeal file number we are hearing today is PL 2020-0157. I would now welcome the parties. I'm first turning to the appellant. Ms. Pasham, if you could unmute. I've got a couple of questions for you.
Hello.
Hello, welcome. Now, first of all, welcome to the hearing. I'm going to explain how it's going to run fairly shortly, but first of all, I've introduced the board members who will be hearing this today. Do you have any objection to any of the board members hearing this appeal?
No, sir.
Great, thank you very much. And just to confirm, have you received a copy of the agenda package that was
Yes.
distributed to the board? Okay. And do you have any objections to the information provided?
No, sir.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, so now you can go back on mute, and I will turn to Mr. Anania. Once again, actually, I should start. Mr. Anania, will you be speaking for yourself, or will your agent be speaking for you? Who should I be directing the questions to?
For the most part, to Mr. Souster.
Okay. Okay, we had some feedback there. Okay, so okay, then if Mr. Anania, if you could go on mute, and Mr. Souster, do you have? I'll ask the same question. Do you have any objections to the board members hearing this appeal?
None, sir.
Great, thank you. And you've received a copy of the agenda package?
I did, sir.
Great, thank you very much.
And we, if I may, sir, to the chair, we also received a couple of very late submissions, the most recent of which came in just a couple of minutes before the Zoom meeting commenced. So, you know, I guess on a technical, from a technical perspective, we would be objecting to the late provision, but I'm in your hands with respect to that. And we're prepared to speak to those late submissions in any event.
Sure. Well, thank you for that. And yes, we received those late submissions as well. The way we operate with this, those could have been provided to us at the hearing themselves, and so we would deal with it. So in a way, we kind of get an advanced look of something that could have been handed to us and distributed at the hearing. So we'll proceed, and of course it'll be up to the board to determine how much weight it gives to any submission that it receives. Great, thank you. So once again, welcome to this hearing. This is how it's going to proceed. First, I'll be asking administration to make a presentation. Then the appellant will speak in favor of the appeal. This will be followed by others speaking in favor of the appeal, if there are any, and any correspondence in favor of the appeal. Then the applicant's agent in this case will speak in opposition to the appeal, and any others that are present would like to speak in opposition, and any correspondence in opposition to the appeal. Lastly, if there's any of those speaking neither in favor nor in opposition to the appeal, and any related correspondence. At any time, the board may ask for clarification by any of the persons speaking to the appeal. The board may then ask for a short recess if necessary. To close then, the administration will be asked if they wish to provide any clarification or closing remarks. followed by any clarification or closing remarks by the applicant or the appellant or the applicant. I would just like to say at this time that closing remarks, of course, are just to provide any clarification. They're not to repeat and represent what you've already done before. The board will then close the public portion of the hearing and go in camera, which means private, and review all of the information provided. The board will then provide a written decision within 15 days from this hearing. The purpose of the hearing is for the appellant and affected parties to provide the board with information to the appeal. The board must base its decision on planning merits. As outlined a moment ago, affected persons will be given an opportunity to speak. Please ensure that all comments are directed to the board. Also, we would ask that all comments be of proper decorum and be succinct. If another person has already made a point, simply state that you agree with the point and continue. I think that that's the entirety of the process that we'll be going to today. Does the appellant have any concerns with the process as outlined?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Souster, does the applicant have any concerns with the process outlined?
None.
Great, thank you. Very good, then let's get into it. I would now ask the development officer, Mr. Gravel, to make his presentation with respect to the appeal.
Okay, allow me to just bring up my PowerPoint presentation for the board. A moment. I'll ask to share my screen here. Can everyone see that?
Yes, it looks good.
Great. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Development permit application PL 2020-0157 was received by the Planning Department on June 18th and approved on July 14th. A notice of appeal was received 7 days later within the required 21-day time period. An appeal hearing was scheduled for this afternoon, which is within the required 30-day time period. Letters of notification were mailed to adjacent landowners on July 30th and are assumed to have been received more than 5 days as required in advance of today's hearing. An advertisement for today's hearing was also placed in the August 6th and 13 editions of the Rocky Mountain Outlook. So in administration's opinion, the statutory requirements, before I proceed with my formal presentation, are considered to have been satisfied.
Thank you, Mr. Gravel. I do concur that the statutory requirements have been met.
Great. Okay. Okay, I'd like to just begin with, it's already been said, but the application number again, this is again development permit application PL 2020-0157, which is for a boutique liquor store located at 112 737 7th Avenue. I'll start with a bit of site context for you. The red box on the slide indicates the location of the subject unit. It's located in the downtown, just off of Main Street along 7th Avenue. Across the street is the post office in Rusticana. The unit is within a commercial building that includes, for example, Mountain Mercantile and Beamer's Coffee. Here we see the existing building and commercial uses, as well as the location of the subject unit. A bit more detail regarding the proposed application. So it's for a boutique liquor store, which means it has a focus on a specialty product. It focuses on mixed culture beer. The proposed liquor store is about 60 square meters in area. It has appropriate street frontage. You can see from the plan here at the bottom, it has permeable windows, and there will also be product on display beside the windows, which is what we like to see. The applicant obtained approval in principle from the Alberta Gaming and Liquor Commission. And with respect to parking, there are no changes in the parking requirements. The application was approved for the following reasons. First, the proposed use meets the land use bylaws definition for a liquor store. It is intended for the sale of beer, and full walls physically separate it from other units. The land use bylaw requires both approval in principle from the HLC and visually permeable windows. As I mentioned, the application package includes and demonstrates compliance with these requirements. Finally, it meets the criteria for approving discretionary uses in the land use bylaw, which I'll give a little bit more detail on. So section 1.10.0.3 of the land use bylaw outlines the criteria for evaluating and approving discretionary uses. The first three items are listed up on the slide as they relate to one another. They include any plans or policies affecting the parcel, the location of the parcel, and the appropriateness of the proposed development, the merits of the proposed development, and its compatibility with the intent of the land use district. So with respect to plans and policies, the Town Center Enhancement Concept Plan provides direction. This plan is intended to sort of direct development in the downtown. Within the plan, it has the goal of an intensified and broad range of land uses in the town center area. With respect to the purpose of the TC district, the land use district that governs the downtown, the purpose of this area is to provide a broad range of commercial, entertainment, cultural, and residential uses in mixed-use buildings to serve as a focal point for community business and civic activities. So the key planning question here is, does the proposed liquor store in and itself complement or inhibit a range of uses in the downtown? So given it's a boutique liquor store that offers a specialty product, it's modest in size, and administration's opinion, in and itself, it does complement the goal of a range of a mix of uses. The other question is whether the addition of a liquor store in conjunction with the existing liquor stores inhibits this goal of a mix of uses. There are 3 existing liquor stores in the downtown. None are adjacent to each other or the proposed liquor store. You can see on the slide the locations of these liquor stores. Keep in mind, the white boxes don't represent the size of the stores. It's just there to allow you to be able to read the writing. So, but there are 3 existing liquor stores generally in these areas. Only Rusty's Liquor Store has prime downtown frontage, as Canmore Wine Merchants is located in a basement, and Three Peaks Liquor is located at the back of a mall. Also keep in mind there is a significant area of downtown not shown on this slide, the other portion of Main Street, all of 10th Street, that's also considered downtown. Therefore, given the separation between the liquor stores, the modest size of the proposed liquor store, and the rather small number of liquor stores with some with poor frontage in the downtown, administration believes the goal for a mix of uses is not inhibited by one more liquor store. The other 2 items for evaluating and approving a discretionary use include the potential impact of the development with respect to adjacent parcels. This business is proposed to have normal business hours. There are no anticipated disturbances such as exterior noise, odor, or bright lights that you wouldn't normally see with a retail type business. With regards to service and access, there are no changes to service and access. So in conclusion, the application was approved as it met the definition for a liquor store. Approval in principle was provided by the AGLC, features visible permeable windows, and it meets the criteria for discretionary uses in the land use bylaw. And that concludes my presentation. Happy to take any questions the board may have.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Gravel. We can go back to, there we go, full screen. So now I would look to my board members to see if there's any questions for Mr. Gravel. Show of hands and I'll acknowledge you. Ms. Hanford, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Gravel, for your presentation. Is there a comparison in size of the other liquor stores? You had mentioned that this one is 60 square meters and it's a modest size. Do we have any idea what the other square footage of the other liquor stores are?
I do not offhand.
Okay. And you mentioned that none of these buildings or none of these liquor stores are adjacent to each other.
Correct.
They're all spread around the downtown in different areas.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions from any other member? Okay, I do have a question. Just to verify, Mr. Gravel, does the land use bylaw require any distance between liquor stores or put any limits on numbers?
No, sir.
Okay. Has there ever been, to your knowledge, has there ever been a bylaw that limited the number of liquor stores in Canmore?
I can't say for certain. It's my understanding that I think in one of our land use bylaws, we did have a separation requirement, but it's not in the current land
Okay.
use bylaw.
Okay. Do you know if the AGLC has any distance requirements between liquor stores?
My understanding is they don't have a separation requirement between liquor stores, but they do require that you are physically separated from another unit.
Right.
So Safeway, for example, couldn't
That's
remove the wall between the two. And
right. That's why we don't have liquor stores in our grocery stores.
exactly.
Right. Okay. Okay, very good. Seeing no other questions then, thank you, Mr. Gravel. I would now ask Ms. Pasham to make your presentation with respect to your appeal.
Sure, sir. I just want to share my screen so you can see the presentation.
Okay. Okay, very good. It's there.
Are you able to see, sir?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. All right. Based on these points, I want to oppose the approval. As Mr. Nathan mentioned, that specifically, he mentioned that Mr. Alania's products are specialty mixed culture beers, and he has forgotten about the COVID, what COVID has affected small businesses. And these 3 existing liquor stores are already in 240 meters. This new liquor store is very close proximity between me and Rusty's Liquor. 2. Point number 3 is he was stressing about the space. It is a moderate size comparatively other liquor stores. My liquor store size and this proposed liquor store has only 15 square feet difference, 1-5. So how will that make a major difference to approve this one? And I wanted to ask the planning officer, when he mentioned in his letter that Mr. Anania is going to, it's not a typical liquor store, he's going to sell mixed beer, or technically we in the business, we call it craft beers, microbrewing, craft distillery products at a growler's bar. And he is introducing this products for the very first time in Bow Valley. I am showing you the pictures which I have taken by their permissions of Sobeys Liquor, Safeway Liquor, Rusty's Liquor, and I have a video to prove that Rusty, small liquor businesses like me, sell 80% of craft beers, which Mr. Anania is saying that he is introducing it to the market, which we have already been selling. So how does it will come under diversified downtown district? Or I wanted to ask the planning officer, did he went and visited, physically to check is Mr. Anania what he's claiming is true?
Ms. Pasham, the decision for the application is now with the Subdivision and Development Appeal Board. So what Mr. Gravel decided actually is neither there, here or there, because we have the power to either uphold, reverse, or otherwise deal with this. So it's for us now to decide
Sir,
whether there's good planning merit. So you've presented your information, and thank you for that. So please
yes, sir.
continue.
So as you can see, I went in personally and I have approached other businesses to know how the craft business market runs. So you need to understand here, the liquor business, we have 14 liquor stores. So we need to have a different niche in the market. in the community. So we have opted for craft beers. When we opened, we opted for craft beers and we opted for growler bars. But we didn't go ahead with growler bars because at that point of time, the liquor depot in Canmore and Banff had the growler bars. So technically, what Mr. Anania is showing is he's going to open a typical liquor store. You can give it a fancy name, it's a craft boutique liquor store or whatever it is, because is Mr. Anania going to own the product? Are the breweries going to specifically make the products where Mr. Anania is the only one who can sell it? All the products has to buy through AGLC. It doesn't matter where the products are coming or where the products are making. AGLC, you have to follow the AGLC laws. So I wanted to ask Mr. This based on that I have appealed, like, how can a person says that I am going to have a mixed beers where anybody else has offered, ever? Because the same portfolio of the breweries will be with AGLC, and anybody in the province can order these products and sell it. 1.1. And 2, I wanted to see here how the market is already saturated with so many liquor stores. Canmore has at the moment 14,911 in population, and we have 13 liquor stores are already in, they have invested their life savings in their businesses. Here I want to point it out. So my store is not a new store. I moved my store from Bow Valley Trail to here, and when I went in and I checked just on the downtown district how many different stores we have. Okay, let's say the planning commission has this thing in mind. Okay, we have 5 different varieties of each subsector. Okay, yeah, we have 2 more space for this liquor store. Let's give it a try. The overall pharmacy, we have 8 in the town, clothing stores 13, grocery stores 5. In this grocery stores, none of the convenience stores are in. Gift shops 11, art galleries 13, specialty stores 7. In the downtown district, I did not completely I did not categorized it. 4 women clothing stores. We have 3 coffee shops, 11 other category retail and ad galleries, and 3 liquor stores already at the moment. Rusty's liquor store faces in the storefront. Wine merchant faces still in the storefront, but only 3 steps down inside. And 3 Peaks Liquor, which is inside the mall. As you can see, this is one of the busiest pedestrians walk, people access to the main street. So technically, I have the walk-in customers too. So it should not give any, extra leverage when you give or approve an application just because it's in a storefront. Here is another statistics which I have taken. How many liquor stores are there in the surrounding areas surrounding to us? Sylvan Lake has 16,467 population and they have 10 liquor stores. So 1,600 people has 1 liquor store. Cochrane has 29,227 population. It has 14 liquor store. And let me tell you, sir, Cochrane is one of the busiest market for craft beers. 2,447 people is to 1 liquor store. The same goes with the Banff, Calgary, Edmonton, Jasper. Canmore, we have 1,140 people for 1 liquor store, wherein we have 13, and if you add another 14 liquor store, the margin, the survival of the business will go down drastically. And here I want to point out, after Ace opened, Ace is a discounted liquor store. If the town has approached or just to try to understand what is going through with the small businesses after COVID, it will understand Ace has already reduced 35% of all our sales, irrespective of wines, irrespective of spirits, irrespective of beers. 2, the AGLC has given permission to all the restaurants to sell liquor directly to their customers. So earlier, it used to be the AGLC, the restaurants cannot sell only liquor. a person can, indulge liquor while they are eating. But after COVID, it has changed. So all the restaurants on Main Street, we are competing with them too when it comes to liquor sales. So how, and each and every restaurant, if you check their menus, they carry craft beers too, which is Mr. Anania is calling mixed beers. So nowhere it will help us in any ways. And this one, so COVID, sorry, I just need a minute. COVID has gutted us. COVID has gutted us. I wanted to ask, I've been dying to ask. Nobody are giving me an answer. The town economic department knows about me because I've been approaching them because being at a new location, I was not eligible for any refund, relief funds. I know it's nothing to do with you guys, it is with to my finances. I wanted to ask how the town is thinking. I asked the same thing to the planning officer on that day. I broke down and I asked him the same thing. This is not regular circumstances. COVID happened. You cannot ignore that. People are suffering. Small business are suffering. They are the most to suffer. What are the measurements the town is taking to have the stability of existing businesses? I wanted to point out to you in the economic planning and strategy 2020 to 2024 on the town's website, it very clearly mentions one of the core focusing is to have the existing businesses and the people have a sustainability, a stability. How is it is that? Is this approval is not breaking the very, strategy what the town has? Point number two, sorry, parking. I try to understand what the parking needs because when I took over this place, the planning officer has said that I need to show at least 2 parking stalls for my store. Luckily, this mall has the designated parking only for our patrons. Okay, so that was the impression I had that you need to have a designated parking or you need to have some kind of parking to show. So the street parking is not technically parking given to that particular building. It is given to the public because anybody can use it. It is not specifically designated to that particular side of the building. And if you go and see, most of the time the parking is full because until this full, again, let me point it out, is full during the timings of the post office till 4:30. After 4:30, you will be lucky enough to get the parking. So, and when I asked it, the Mr. Anania told me that he has shown the public parking here. This public parking is so congested that we have to request, I can show you at the moment outside our own parking, we have to request the people to remove their vehicles so the customers of us, our mall can come and park there. It is already congested. And I wanted to point here, this one I read it in the newspaper. What the mayor said, I hear from residents that simply don't come downtown anymore because it's too busy. I am anticipating that through this program we will find that residents start coming back into the downtown because it is easier and it is less congested. This is about the paid parking. He mentioned it. Here you need to understand 2 points. He knows, he's acknowledging that downtown district parking is already congested and 2, locals are not coming as they used to and shop. They're not spending time here in downtown district because of the parking. This is another point which I want you to note. And the main thing I wanted to highlight, and I wanted to show you, I have highlighted, I have taken this from the letter the planning officer said. I would like to read this, sir. The TC district proposes statement supports a broad range of commercial, entertainment, culture, and agriculture uses in mixed use buildings. Furthermore, the applicant is proposing a boutique liquor store that focuses on the sale of mixed culture beer, a specialty product. So here, the planning officer mentioned that he has approved this application just because it is a different liquor store. It is a liquor store which is going to sell different cultural beers, wherein I have already shown you the proof that in town already people are selling that culture, mixed culture beers for so long. So Mr. Anania is not contributing anything new to the market. We are already have invested in this. This goes against to the economic development strategy, which I mentioned earlier. So before I close, I want you to keep into consideration the main important thing which happened is COVID-19 and how it is affecting the small businesses. As I mentioned to Jolene, and I have sent this letter as well to her. This letter is from one of the business owner who is closing. He opened his store 2 months after me. He's closing his doors this month end because he cannot survive COVID. I have proof. I've told to Ms. Jolin too that I am ready to submit my tax returns where it shows how I am struggling. COVID has gutted us, sir. This approval will bury us, plain and simple. You cannot ignore which something happened, which nobody can control how the effects are. So what makes Mr. Anania, who hasn't invested, more important than a person who has already invested in a verge of losing everything? If I would have been a very competitive person, like Mr. Ananya's lawyer mentioned, that this is a basic grab and go beer, I wouldn't have offered Mr. Ananya to take over my space without any profit. I'm in that kind of situation. And this is because of COVID. If COVID wouldn't have happened, I never would have appealed. I never would. And you need to understand this store has opened a year ago. I do not have that kind of traction like Rusty has or like the wine merchant has. So I wanted to know what the town is doing for the existing business to survive. I, I just want to know, I want somebody to answer that to me, sir. I'm sorry, I don't want to cry in front of everybody and make a fool out of myself. And I wanted to show you, I stood in front of Bemis, I stood in front of Town Hall, and I have printed this. Please. And I asked their opinion. These are honest locals' opinion. I have collected 47, honest opinions about what they think of new liquor store. Everybody has been, telling only one thing. We need a different businesses instead of a liquor store. And I have submitted this. It's a late submission because I didn't want to approach people whom I know because I felt it is like cheating. I didn't approach any of my tenants, my next door neighbors or the restaurants whom I supply. Otherwise, I would have had many more to show, but I felt it's not right. I went in an honest way. I stood on the road and I asked people of Canmore what they think. And I have submitted this to Ms. Jolien, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pasham. And I would like to say that I certainly have compassion for what I've heard you say, and the circumstances that you're describing are certainly being felt by a lot of people. What we have to do here is we have to hear the evidence that you've provided and the evidence that the other evidence that we receive, and we have to decide on the best for planning purposes. But we have heard you, and I really do appreciate you sharing with us all of your concerns.
May I ask you one question, sir? When you ask Mr. Anania, when he says it's a mixed beer, what he's going to sell, the specialty product, can you ask that he has contract and he has sole copyrights from the breweries and distilleries where he is the only one who can sell it.
Well, Mr. Souster will be providing us with evidence shortly. Um, Whether or not the beer is in fact unique or not, may or may not be of particular relevance for the planning decision. We'll have to evaluate that based on the evidence we hear and make a decision based on that. So thank you. Now I am going to, if you could stay unmuted for a moment, because I am going to check with my board members to see if anybody has any questions for you. I have a couple of questions for clarification. It seems to me, based on the whole of the presentation that you have provided, that your biggest concern is that the market is already saturated and that there's too much competition. And now this will add to that. Is that correct? Or
No, sir. That is a very 0.5, in the 100% thing. My main concern is how should I sustain financially after COVID happened? Because if you check Mr. Nathan's, the map, if you go from my store, it's hardly 2 minutes to the new liquor store. And if you check from the new liquor stores to Rusty, it's again hardly 2 minutes to walk. We are so close to each other that there is no space for even for breathing. And earlier, when I took over the space, I very clearly asked, what are the rules? Because when you open a liquor store, you have to be very, very thorough of the competition, of the traction, what kind of people come. At the time, I have been told that there is a 240 meters in between two liquor stores. And here I have to mention this, my landlord has forced us to take the front end space, which was vacant at that point of time. But we didn't take it. We took this one because it puts a lot of distance between me and Rusty. Mr. Ananya did try to get that space too. My landlord, Mr. Dave Ninch, mentioned to me the other day that Mr. Ananya wanted to take that the front end space, but my landlord refused it. I came to know that there is no gap when I've seen the ad, when I seen the application on the street window, because we were in the impression that if anybody opens a liquor store on Main Street, there should be a 240 meters in between. That's it. Here, it is not about the competition. Here, it is about the survival of the COVID.
okay, so let me just explore this then. I mean, the COVID, if that's the primary concern to you, what does that have to do with this new application?
This application that puts already we are in a recession, in a COVID recession. If that liquor store opens, my major sales are 70% of craft beer. So if he opens a liquor store, it's just like any other person opens a clothing store next to a clothing store who is already sinking. It is going to niche the market. It is going to niche his resources. The same thing with me too. It is going to put pressure in such a way that financially we are already in the breakage point. That's why I have offered Mr. Ananya to take over this space. You can ask him. I didn't even ask him to pay me for profit.
Yeah.
This liquor store,
So it
what is
is
the reason to give a liquor store when we have already 3 liquor stores in 240 radius?
okay. Well,
Point A. 2, when I opted for this space, I very clearly mentioned that my focal point would be microbrewing, small wineries and small distilleries where it's run by, local farmers, in a support to them. When a planning officer asked me and the AGLC has asked me, that was what I have mentioned to that. So at that time, Rusty was not carrying that much of craft beers. But he started carrying. Now, what I'm trying to tell you is this liquor store is no different than the existing liquor stores. So I wanted to ask the planning and development, what makes it special? What makes it different for you to put extra pressure on existing businesses who are already broken because of COVID? The town has to, yes, the town, we expect, I personally, sir, I'm from India, where I come from a broken system. We opted to settle in Canada. I lived in New Zealand and I lived in Australia. I'm a master's. My last job was vice president MasterCard. My husband was an aeronautical engineer. We opted to settle here. He's been living here since 2007 because we love this town. I've been asking everybody, nobody has given me a right answer. The town planning and development has to know how the small businesses are affected before they do the changes, or they do introduce new competition, or they break, this already saturated market. We have 13 liquor stores for 14,000 people, and we have,
Yep. Yep. Ms. Pasham, you're repeating the evidence you provided, so thank you very much. You raised the issue of parking. How does this particular business affect parking worse than any other type of business? I mean, there's going to be some business in there. So just if you could clarify that for me, please.
So, because I've been operating a liquor business from last 2.5 years, most of the patrons who come to shop in a liquor store, they don't 80% of them are by car. They come by car because if they, for example, growlers, they have the jug of growlers. You cannot expect a jug of growler, holding and walking. It's not practical. So any liquor store you go, if you stand there and see, every in 10 people, 8 people have a car. It's a basic map. And there, that particular place is already, you have three car parking in front of the, the post office, and 3 parking in front of this store. Wherein, if you check, the post office is one of the busiest place in town until 4:30. All right, Beamus, again, let's not forget about Beamus. Beamus is one of the busiest coffee shop on downtown district. And most of the Beamus, if you check, there are many people who drive, before go to work, who drive to grab, their favorite coffee from Beamus and they go. So how this being particularly, I objected for the parking just because it's a liquor store. If it would have been anything else, like a clothing or anything, or accessories or shoe store, I wouldn't have objected because these products you can carry. But liquor, again, liquor has 4-pack, 6-packs, 12-packs, growlers, where most of the people will not walk, for a long distance. So they opt for to purchase where there is a, good parking. That's why I opted this out.
Great. Thank you very much. Looking to the board, are there any other questions for the appellant? Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Basham. You can go back on mute now. Appreciate your presentation. So now I would ask that the clerk, is there somebody speaking in favor of this appeal? I believe there is a Patricia Barda.
That's correct.
Right. If we could ask Patricia to please, I don't know if she can unmute herself.
I did.
Okay, there you are. And
Oh, good.
Can we show her video as well? Great, there we go.
There.
Welcome, Ms. Barda. The floor is yours.
Thanks for having me here. I'm not a business owner, but I work for different small businesses in town. I was always wondering why the town of Canmore hasn't got a limit on how many clothing, grocery, cannabis, liquor stores, etc. we need in this town. When all the cannabis stores opened last year, I was wondering how all of them were able to make enough money to survive. And as we already see, one of them is closing. The same for the liquor stores in town. Don't we have enough liquor stores in this town, or do we need a liquor store on every corner of the street? I'm asking the town of Canmore to rethink opening another liquor store across from the post office, where we have on the next corner the Rusticana liquor store. What kind of an image are we creating here? It would be nice for people out of town to visit Canmore and see more store business varieties. At one time, Alberta gaming, liquor, and cannabis had a distance restriction between liquor stores. I understand that this was recently removed. I wonder why the town did not choose to then make it a municipal regulation. BAM seems to have it under control with only 7 liquor stores, while Canmore already has, at 13 liquor stores, more stores per capita than anywhere in Alberta. Free enterprise may be a big part of our financial system, but I feel it is a little out of control in Canmore. Maybe we need to think about how it looks to have this many liquor stores. Is this the kind of image Canmore wants to present? I understand this new liquor store was presented to the town as a specialty concept, but it is really just another liquor outlet. I and a lot of people I've talked to don't think it's fair that the new liquor store will be taking away business from the 2 liquor stores who are already very close to each other in downtown Canmore. A question to the town, if the town cares about existing business owners. If so, you would not let this happen. It's simple to do the calculations, and we know that for the existing 13 liquor stores that we have in Canmore, in a time that we're facing right now, it's hard to make a living. Why didn't you see this and went ahead to approve another liquor store in town? So those are my presentation and my questions.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank
Barta. Thank you very much. I will look to my board members to see if there are any questions. Seeing none, I thank you for your presentation. And you may, we're going to be muting and turning off your video. You may, of course, stay and listen to the hearing. And thank you very much for your participation today. Now I will look to the clerk with regards to, is there any additional correspondence in favor of the appeal?
Yeah, we did receive 3 written submissions by members of the public, and then there were the 2 written submissions that were received late.
Okay, thank you. And we have copies of all of those, correct?
Yes, you do, as well
Yes.
as everybody involved.
Great. Thank you very much. Noted. Okay, now moving to Mr. Souster, I would now ask you to make your presentation on behalf of the applicant.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I'm going to do this a little bit differently than I have in these types of applications before. We had the pleasure of hearing a lot of information that wasn't provided in the package. But I'd like to speak to a couple of things that I heard firstly. And then I think what is really important from my perspective is, I think, trying to understand what it is that is the appeal that's being brought. And I think you, Mr. Chair, touched upon that in your questions. It struck me that initially this was solely a competition-based appeal. And I think that that is also addressed in the written submissions of Mr. Gravel. But through the discussion with the appellant, I think that was, if I understood her correctly, maybe the 5th of her considerations, the first being COVID. In relation to COVID, while it is a difficult time, and I guess touching on the competition-based aspect, we do still live in a free market society, and there is relief that is available to Ms. Pasham if she's experiencing financial woes in relation to COVID. But with respect to yourself, sir, and the members of this board, that is not a problem that the SDAB is tasked with, nor is it a true planning consideration. I also heard some comments that apparently 70% of Three Peaks sales is in relation to craft beer. Yet from the information that we presented, there's only one shelf that purports to have what Mr. Anania and I think others in the true craft beer genre would speak as kind of just the local craft beer, not the true specialty craft beer. So one of the questions that I had, and it's more rhetorical than anything, is if 70% is craft beer being sold from Three Peaks, why is only one shelf being stocked with purported craft beer? And what's the reason for all of the other beer and alcohol that's being sold from the location? I also will point out that notwithstanding that there may be 13 other liquor stores, it is only Ms. Pasha and Three Peaks that is appealing. And we've heard comments from the other lady, I can't remember her last name, but that spoke in favor of the appeal, saying that all of the beer stores and all of the liquor stores are suffering. Certainly that information has not been substantiated with any coherent evidence. And in fact, my understanding is that liquor stores are doing better, not worse, on average in the COVID situation. I think what's crucial, whether this is a true competition-based appeal or not, is for the board to fully understand and fully appreciate the concept and the business model that's being put forth by Mr. Anania. And we talked this morning in my office, and the way that I like to phrase it is his business model is to be different, not to be the same, to distinguish himself, to appeal to a different market. And in conjunction with that, also offer things that the other businesses that operate liquor stores do not offer. And that is a true cultural perspective in introducing the people to Canmore as well as the visitors to Canmore, a true experience in the true craft beer and specialty market. I can't do it justice, but Mr. Anania can. But I did want to touch upon a couple of points. Mr. Anania is an award-winning beer curator in Canmore. He's going to be heavily focused on craft beers, refillable growlers, and crowlers. Crowlers was a term that I wasn't familiar with, even though I fancy myself a craft beer aficionado. And that is basically being able to package liquid beer into cans. So they actually do can them right on site. And that's something that's unique to Canmore and the Bow River Valley. It's not offered by any other store. In addition, and without casting any negative aspersions on the existing liquor stores, Mr. Anania's focus is also going to be on a visually pleasing store. So it's going to be modern, it's going to be upscale. He's going to be using top of the line equipment in a small boutique style liquor store. And so that visual appearance distinguishes himself from any of the other liquor stores. We're not saying anyone is better than worse. It's really just an apples to oranges comparison. And that ties into the experience and the diversity even within this broad genre of liquor stores. Now, I don't really understand the appellant's questions about is he going to own the liquor rights and copyrights. That's not something that I've ever come across in my 20 years in dealing with AGLC issues or in dealing with SADB boards. But we're calling it MCBS as an acronym for the proposed business. It's going to have access and gain access to small batch products. And the issue is these are products that neither Three Peaks nor any of the liquor stores currently carry. So while it may be open to Three Peaks to increase their craft beer variety, they're currently not offering it. And I will point out, sir, that we did some reconnaissance in relation to Three Peaks as well as some of the other liquor stores. And my client, Mr. Anania, went into the stores and looked at what their craft beer selections were before he had opportunity to speak with Ms. Pasham and afterwards. There was a marked increase in the number of craft beers that were offered at her store after he spoke to her. So while that's open to her, we are seeing that perhaps there is a change in her business focus to align herself more with Mr. Yanina's application, which may be slightly convenient in the current circumstances. But be that as it may, he is focusing on differentiating himself, and I'll let him speak to that. But currently, there are no other stores in Canmore and the Bow River Valley that have a business model such as he is proposing. There are no liquor stores in Canmore that allows customers to purchase a crowler or to refill a growler of their favorite specialty offerings. Well, that may have been something that Ms. Pasham envisioned when she started her liquor store about a year ago. It's not being offered. MCBS will also be carrying a small and very select variety of spirits and wines. And again, these are varieties that are not currently stocked at any liquor store in the Valley. And Mr. Anani advised me, and he can confirm that when dealing with his liquor reps, he wants to differentiate himself. So if it is something that is being carried by one of the other local liquor stores or wine stores, that is a product that he's going to opt out of carrying. He wants to provide unique and specialty wines and liquors. The other thing that's interesting is the niche craft beer market in Alberta is expanding and continues to expand. The number of craft breweries in Alberta has also increased by about 60%, from 70 breweries to 112 from the years 2017 to 2018, a cultural phenomenon. So in addition to the varieties of the beers that Mr. Anani is going to carry, he's also going to be offering a couple of other things that we would like to characterize as more cultural or educational informative events. So he is going to be holding testings for different varieties of beers and wines and liquor, primarily focusing on those specialty true craft beers. There are going to be specialty releases and what's called tap takeovers. So it's an opportunity for local and other breweries to come in and show their wares with small tastings and educate those people that are interested in this genre of beer to learn about it and experience different types of beer that is available to them. So his business model is not solely about selling beer, but it's also designed to enhance the quality of life and quality of enjoyment for Canmore residents and their visitors that will result in an economic benefit to this community. So it really is an apples and oranges comparison. You know, if we're looking at and getting more back into the planning consideration arguments, if this is a true competition-based appeal, that's not usually a consideration for a planning commission or the planning appeal board to take into consideration. It has been put forward, as I understand, by Mr. Gravel on the basis that there may be a concern with spatial separation. But I would echo Mr. Gravel's comments in that this is not a situation where we're right side beside each other. There's not two locations even with the same building or even on the same crossroads or even on the same street. There is three in the entire downtown area. So I don't see this as being something that is or should be a big concern for the board, sir, in relation to spatial separation or even from a clustering perspective. And again, with respect to competition, it is not a consideration in and of itself that should be determinative of this appeal. One of the other things that I noticed is I don't believe that the appellant has tied in her competition-based argument or the COVID argument into the town's purpose statement in relation to its enhancement concept plan for the TC district. We see this and we submit that this will support a broad range of commercial, entertainment, cultural, and residential uses, well, not residential, but cultural in a mixed use building. And it will be a focal point for the community business and civic activities. We think that this is going to distinguish himself from the existing liquor stores. It's going to provide something that is unique to Canmore, is unique to the Bow Valley, and provides an experience that is not simply attending at your liquor store, as Ms. Pashman said, picking up a 6-pack or a case of beer or even a growler and leaving. This is designed to be an experience and something that is unique to the municipality. I'd like to invite Mr. Anania to buttress my submissions, because I think it's important for the board to fully understand what his concept is and how that ties in to the purpose statement for the town, and also speaks to the competition-based argument in the appeal.
Great, thank you, Mr. Souster. Mr. Anania, I would certainly like to offer the floor to you. Just before you go, though, or before you speak, if you could speak to the concept, but if it's dealing with any of the other arguments that Mr. Souster has already made, please know that we've heard them, so you don't need to repeat those. But if you could dive into the concept, that would be great. And you just need to unmute, and then we'd be pleased to hear from you.
Thank you. So without repeating too much of what Mr. Souster said, my intention in all of this was to differentiate myself with my connections that I already have in the industry. I've worked 10 years in restaurants in Canmore and made a lot of connections through that, not only with beer, but with liquor and spirits as well. Sometimes these breweries only make, a couple kegs that are available to sell, and then they'll keep the rest for themselves to serve at their own establishment. So sometimes you get the opportunity to order a product that's not readily available. Of course, it has to go through the AGLC and comply with all those regulations, but sometimes the reps or sales agents will offer product to those who can cater to the product and speak highly of it and actually educate their customers on it. That's what I'm trying to do. And with my connections that I already have, I do feel I have the availability to differentiate myself that way. Not only with the product being carried, because of course, as Ms. Passion pointed out, there are other liquor stores that do sell introductory craft beer in Canmore, but not to get too involved in semantics, there is a step further that you can go with craft beer. So I just wanted to let the board be aware of that, and that's all I have. Oh, I think you're muted.
Thank you, Mr. Anania. And here I remind you to go off and mute, and I don't do the same. Mr. Souster, do you have any further comments?
I'll just briefly speak to the parking issue. You took the words out of my mouth, sir, when you're asking the question about what the difference would be between this store and any other potential business would enter the premises. We heard a lot of information from Ms. Pasham about people not being able to carry growlers to their car while they would carry a box of shoes. I would simply say, sir, I don't see that there's any evidential value to that apparent observation. I don't agree with it. While that may be Ms. Pasham's experience in her store, there was no evidence to buttress that in any way, shape, manner, or form. People will either walk if they want to walk, or they'll drive a car if they want to drive a car. The nature of the product which they're purchasing, as opposed to the weight or how easy it is to carry, I think would be a more reasoned basis for it. I will conclude this point by pointing out that the application complies with the parking requirements, and that should be the primary and overriding consideration by this board. So simply, our arguments are very simple, sir. If this is a competition-based approach, those should only be entertained by the board in extraordinary circumstances. We do not see this as being one. If it is not a competition-based appeal, and it is something else to do with COVID, I don't really know how to answer that, except to say that that is not a planning consideration. While it may be a concern for the town, and while there may be some additional bylaws or town initiatives that could be undertaken to assist businesses, it's not something that this board should entertain for the purposes of the appeal. And finally, sir, the only way that a competition approach should be considered if it somehow impacts the spatial aspects and what I like to term a clustering. 3, I don't think is a cluster when they're on separate roadways, when they're on separate streets, and given the size of the downtown area. I also note that I don't know about the accuracy of some of the other information that was presented, even presuming that it's accurate. I did not see that Canmore stood out like a sore thumb with respect to the number of liquor stores per capita. I saw it as being in line with Jasper, very close to Banff and the others. So I don't think that one more liquor store is the straw that will break the camel's back, as has been presented by Ms. Pasham. And given the real differentiation between the market, the clientele, the whole layout of the store, and its overall concept, again, I'm saying that this is more like apples and oranges than apples to apples, sir. Those are my submissions.
Great, thank you, sir. I will now open up to my board to see if anybody has any questions. Ms. Sanford, and then Mr. Birch.
Thank you. When AGLC gives an approval, do they make any kind of distinction as to the type of business that will be opening under that approval, or is it essentially just a business license for the sale of liquor?
There are different classifications of licensing, but as relates to this current issue before the board, they don't differentiate. You are able to sell any form of liquor that liquor license would allow you to sell in the form and under the circumstances. So, for instance, Mr. Anania's concept will not allow someone to sit at a table and drink a beer. They can have a small 1 ounce tasting, as you would in some of the other beers or liquor stores in the province. But no, they don't sell like a specialty craft beer only license. It's up to the business owner to differentiate themselves. And I would point out that it would be quite an unwise decision if there is any credence to Ms. Pasham's position that liquor stores are failing. It would be a very unwise business decision for Mr. Anania to copy what the others are doing if they're failing. It would be up to him to distinguish himself in the market. And as I said before, I mean, the reality is we're in a free market society. Competition is good. Competition is not bad, because that what allows businesses to survive, differentiate themselves, and to improve. And I won't stand on my soapbox any longer, but the short answer to your question, madam, is no, there's no distinguishment for the purposes of this application.
Thank you.
Mr. Birch.
Hi, thank you. This has to do with the diversity and probably is a question to Mr. Anania. I'm not a beer expert. Talk to me a little bit about this craft beer element. What makes a craft beer special? How is your store going to offer a different product? In the background material, you'll say you have a 5% overlap or 10 stock keeping units. So what's special about your craft beer that another store couldn't have?
So craft beer drinkers like to try something new every week. They're not shopping for same 6-pack or case of beer that they're going to take out to the lake every week. To have new beer at your store is something special that the good retailers are doing to differentiate themselves. Craft beer specifically, as opposed to the big guys like Molson or Labatt's or whatever, they're not using adjuncts in their beer when they're making it. They're only using the 4 ingredients that you're supposed to be using when you make beer. So, I mean, from a health perspective, people want to know what they're drinking, what they're putting in their body. So, I mean, I hope that answers your question. Is there any follow-up to that?
So I'm aware that I would say there are a couple of craft beer makers already in town, right? And looking at the shelf picture that you provided, those are on sale at Ms. Pasham's store. So are you saying that, and by the way, some of the big brewing companies have bought so-called craft beer, so ownership size isn't really distinctive. I'm more talking about the product. So in terms of the differentiation, what I did hear you say maybe is that you're going to rotate your stock through, so there's a constant change in stock. Is that what makes you different?
I don't know if that necessarily makes me different, but to have a constant rotation is important to the craft beer drinkers. So yeah.
Okay. And just, I think last question, Mr. Chairman, just you are also going to sell wine and alcohol, other kind. What would be your proportion of beer, craft beer versus other wines and liquors? Yeah, an estimate.
Yeah, 75% for beer, and then probably split 12.5% for the other two categories.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Birch.
If I may be
Yes, Mr.
able to
Sessions.
add to that, I'll be very brief. When the question was posed about differentiating from beer, I can answer that not only as counsel for Mr. Anania, but also as a clientele that looks for craft beer. We looked for the rarities. We looked for the new brands that are out there, the new breweries. We're looking for something different and unique. We don't want the regular beers. We don't want even those craft beers of even local breweries at times. And so someone that has the connections and the desire and the wherewithal to seek out these unique brands with different varieties of hops and different contents of alcohol and different flavors, that's something is truly enticing and is unique. The other differentiating factor is the price point. There are craft beers that can cost $26, $34, $12. If I'm just going out and I'm going golfing, I might buy a 6-pack of Coors because it's a hot day. But I'm probably not going to be going out and buying 6 beers at $26. So there's a price point differentiation. There's a different type of customer that is attracted to the craft beers, a different palate. So there's a number of factors that differentiate it from even the more introductory craft beers as opposed to the more generic brands of beers such as Coors Light, Budweiser, and Molson Canadian.
Great, thank you. Mr. Birch, Ms. Pesham, you'll have a chance for clarification coming up. Any other questions from the board? Mr. Scott? You'll have to unmute.
I'm just noticing in your submission that you're saying that you've never mentioned it, but in your submission you've said that you have existing relationships with craft beer import agencies. Now, of course, they have to be brought in through the ALCB, but is this strictly small batches that you would be importing from outside of Canada? Is that what you're proposing?
Mr. Anania?
I mean, so I won't be importing anything personally, but these agents own these companies where they go to different breweries all over the world, whether it be the States or Europe, and they seek out breweries that they want to represent and import them into the Alberta market. I have relationships with a lot of these guys, whether they're only doing small batch, that's not necessarily true, but sometimes they might only be able to get 2-3 kegs shipped from Oregon or wherever it may be. And then the agents will give first dibs to those who can sell their product in a manner they want it sold.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board? Seeing none, I do have a question, Mr. Souster. Of course, we appreciate the written materials that you provided, and we have reviewed them. I did want one point of clarification on page 28 of the package, which is under what may be appealed in your section there. You bring up section 685, subsection 3 of the MGA. And as I read that subsection applies to things that are specifically permitted uses as opposed to discretionary. Could you please comment on that, please?
I just have to,
Sure, yeah, it's
section
the-
685.
yeah, you after your letter, it's the first page after your letter. The section at the bottom there says what may be appealed, and you reference MGA 685 subsection 3.
And then no appeal lies with respect to the issuance of a development permit for a permitted use.
Permitted
That's the
use.
provision of the land use bylaws relaxed, variety misinterpreted.
Yeah.
Yes, that's for a permitted use. And a discretionary use, I guess it can be appealed. And the decision, of course, is within the purview of the Development Appeal Board. I would simply echo my comments that the nature of the application today is, as best as I can tell from the written submissions provided beforehand, really just a business competition appeal.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. I don't think that there's any other questions. So now I will look to Madam Clerk, because I don't believe anybody else is registered to speak in opposition of the appeal. So I would ask, is there any additional correspondence in opposition to the appeal?
There was none.
Okay, great. Thank you.
If I may, I'm sorry to interject. We were trying to have the landlord attend. I believe he was able to get the link just for the public site, but I had spoken with the landlord in advance, and he had asked me if I could present his position. Understandably, he is in favor of the application proceeding and is opposing the appeal. That is Mr. Neil Tanner, the owner of the building in which the proposed development would be situated.
Okay, thank you. Now, and I don't think that there's anybody else scheduled for neither in favor or opposition, and there's no other correspondence. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Madam Clerk? Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
All right, well, now I'm going to move to closing remarks. And as I prefaced previously, I would ask that whether it's the administration, the appellant, or the applicant, that this is not an opportunity to simply repeat what you've said before. It perhaps is an opportunity to respond to something you've heard and you wanted to provide some clarification. And we do want to be, as brief as possible. So that's how I'd encourage you not to repeat what you've said before. First, I'll turn to Mr. Gravel. Does administration have any closing remarks, comments, or clarification?
Yes, sir, I do. First, I wanted to note that there is no provincial direction to eliminate business competition at this time during COVID. The development officer recognized that obviously there were some concerns that the appellant had and recommended that the appellant speak with the Town of Canmore's economic development team, who are working hard with small businesses to support them. But we've received no direction from the province that this is a time in which we should be limiting approvals of any sort. I did also want to note that the application was approved as it does not solely or in conjunction with the existing liquor stores dominate the downtown and inhibit the goal of a mix of uses in the downtown. So I know there's been much discussion about the product that is going to be sold, but really that wasn't the main reason for approval. The main reason here is that the liquor store in and itself and in conjunction will not dominate the downtown. It's not making it so that's the type of use you're seeing when you go down there. There's still that mix of use. It's something that certainly adds to the appeal, but we don't regulate the products of businesses. We don't make clothing stores not sell Nike if we just if we've just approved a store over here that sort of is carrying that brand. It's not something that we want to get into. And I also wanted to mention that the town is not actively recruiting liquor stores. Liquor stores that are in the community have chosen to locate here on their own free will, whether that's because of market demand analysis or they just want to be in the mountains. It's their choice. The planning department has no authority or council direction to limit any type of business from locating within the community. It was noted a concern about parking. As I mentioned, the bylaw doesn't require any increased parking for this change of use. There is, as the appellant has expressed a concern about parking, and I would assume then that the concern is somebody will be parking in their parking stalls, and that's how they would be affected. There is a town lot right adjacent to the building that provides significant amount of public parking. So it's highly likely somebody would park there before ever going over to the private parking behind her building. And finally, Ms. Miller would like to respond to the comment about the economic development strategy. So if the chair has no objections, I'd just like to turn it over to her.
Ms. Miller, please proceed.
Thank you. So just to speak to the economic development strategy that Ms. Pasham referenced, I'd just like to note for the board that that is a recently approved council policy. So that was approved by council in March, which was right before COVID really started to impact our community. So there was just some questions about kind of why the misalignment between our land use regulations and maybe some of the goals and objectives of the economic development strategy. That is one piece of it. Because of the timing of that approval, the next steps of implementation for that strategy have not yet been determined. So at this point, as Nathan has already mentioned, we don't have any council direction to change the town's land use regulations with regard to specific types of commercial development. I would like to note that there could be future changes to the land use bylaw to support that economic development strategy. But there also could be other approaches used to kind of realize some of those elements. So something our economic development department is already looking at and pursuing is greater mentorship of new business owners and encouraging potential businesses who are considering locating in Canmore to meet with our economic development department first and foremost. Primarily because they can assist them in developing a business plan and sharing some of the data that the town already has with regard to businesses in Canmore and market demand and need, just to help those businesses be better, as was mentioned by the appellant, to help support that resilience so that new business owners have an understanding of the market they are potentially moving into before they make that significant investment in a commercial entity that may not be able to survive, or I should say thrive or survive in Canmore's context. So it's just important that the board note that the diversification of business in Canmore, future approaches could include regulation, but it's not contingent upon regulation. We are also looking at greater education and support for local businesses.
Great, thank you, Ms. Miller. Any questions from the board on administration's closing remarks? Mr. Birch?
Hi, this is to do with the parking. It's to Mr. Gravel. Can you explain perhaps why Ms. Pasham thought there was a 2 parking stall requirement for her store and not for Mr. Anenins? Sorry, I mispronounced your name.
I wasn't the file manager for her application, but I can certainly take a stab at what I think occurred. Her application was approved under the previous land use bylaw, which had specific parking requirements for different types of uses. Under the new bylaw, change of uses within existing buildings do not require additional parking.
Okay. Thank you.
And I mean, also, I don't have the old bylaw in front of me, but I couldn't say that there would be additional parking provided under the old bylaw. It may have been from a cannabis to a liquor store, it may have been the same parking requirements as well. So it would have been an apples to apples comparison. I think the change comes in the appellant's case from what the previous use is and what the parking requirements are for that use. And so if what the use that was going in had greater parking requirements, then you would need to provide that parking, or maybe just in her case, identify that it's there or shown that it's been paid cash in lieu of parking in the past. So, but under the current land use bylaw, no parking, no additional parking is required for this application.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gravel. Other questions from the board? Ms. Passion, now is your opportunity to provide closing remarks.
Okay.
Providing clarification, but not repeating arguments, please.
Yes, sir. One thing I wanted to clarify. May I share the screen? I wanted to show you the video. I want to clarify what the sorry. His lawyer, I'm sorry, I do not know his name. He mentioned that I have only half a rack of craft beer. And I wanted to show you 60% of my walk-in cooler are craft beers.
Yeah. So,
And two,
Ms. Passion, I don't think we need to see the video.
okay.
A couple of things. One, Mr. Anania already mentioned that that you did in fact have more after you spoke with each other. And
That's
secondly, I'm not really concerned about the stock that you have on your shelves. As Mr. Gravel mentioned, the planning department cannot control the stock that is approved for the type of use, as long as it complies with that use.
That's true, sir. But I just wanted to clarify what he said, that I have ordered the craft beers after I spoke to him. This is the invoice of the first invoice when I opened my store. In that, 60% of the products are craft beers of last year. And number two, one of the councilwomen asked the development officer, are there any rules of AGLC having the distance? AGLC did have the distance, but AGLC has removed this rule so the municipalities planning and development can plan the downtown district or their community according to their needs. I have reconfirmed this with one of the officer of AGLC in the morning as well. And the other thing I wanted to highlight of what the lawyer has mentioned about the growlers and crawlers. I do not need a separate license, or neither any of the liquor store need a separate license to have drafts installed. Anybody can install this. Two, as the economic development officer mentioned, that there are no, no procedures, or there are no laws on the paper to support existing businesses, or to, just to see to it that the existing businesses can sustain, this. If this would have been before COVID, I wouldn't even have applied, so frankly speaking, I never would have objected. But it did happen, and I'm requesting all the councilmen and women, do not forget that it did happen, and is affecting people like me. I wanted to point out again, there is one business is closing by month end in the same mall where I am in, and there are other two businesses are planning to close by end of November in the same surroundings of mine. I am requesting everybody to take that as well into the consideration. Mr. Anani, I have nothing against him. I don't know him. I am standing here trying to survive. You can name it anything. As the lawyer said, I might be a competitor, or there is no law. I wanted to just take that also into consideration, that it is not competition, sir. It is, I am in such a situation now that I'm completely broke. This new liquor store, as Mr. Anania has, I don't want to go back and repeat what he said. Whatever contacts he has are in the directory of AGLC. We can get the contacts to, anybody can do that. I'm not saying that. He might have expertise in that. I'm not saying any of that. I'm saying to consider what the effects have, what the people are like me are suffering. because of that pandemic recession. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pasham. Any questions from the board on those closing remarks? Seeing none, Mr. Souster, your time for closing remarks, and once again, not to repeat arguments, just to clarify anything that you've heard.
Yes, I think the only thing I'd like to add, sir, and this all depends on the weight, if any, that is attached to the late provision of materials, and specifically the letters and the signatures on those pages. And notwithstanding Mr. Gravel's comments about not being able to control the product and just wrapping up the issue of competition, the letters that I saw that were relevant to the issues and not totally extraneous to the planning considerations speak to items such as this is not the time to be introducing another direct competitor. The other language that I've seen is tourists should have more interesting, the language isn't there, but have a more interesting variety of shops in every corner. And then on the petition, if you will, the language says this letter is to show to the board that most of the locals and business owners are against another liquor store. So the questions that were posed to the signatories and the opinions of some of the other letter writers, it appears that they did not have full understanding of the business plan and the project and the business that Mr. Ananias is proposing. And it's my submission that if they had full information and did consider what he is proposing, as this board has had the opportunity to hear, that their position might very well have been different. And to simply take that into consideration when the board considers the weight of this additional material.
Thank you, sir. And we certainly, that's exactly what we do, is we consider the weight of all of the submissions based on their relevancy to the planning issues at hand. With respect to both the applicant and the appellant submissions, as far as businesses or persons that support, that is certainly noted. Whether or not it relates to planning issues or whether we take into account, that's something we'll certainly discuss. But the decisions we make certainly aren't a popularity contest. It's not based on the numbers that you have in support. It is based on the planning merits that are before us. And we make those decisions solely on that, whether they're popular or unpopular. So thank you for that. Any questions from the board for Mr. Souster? Okay, seeing none. I would like to ask Ms. Pasham.
Yes, sir.
Yes. So we've heard all of your presentation, and thank you for that. And we've asked our questions. Do you feel that you've had a fair hearing?
Yes, sir.
Great. Thank you very much. And then I would ask Mr. Souster, on behalf of the applicant. We've also heard all of your presentations and asked our questions. Do you feel that the applicant has had a fair hearing?
Most certainly.
Great, thank you very much. This hearing is now concluded, and in accordance with provincial legislation, the board is required to hand down its decision within 15 days from today's date. No decision is binding until the board issues a written decision. And while it does say 15 days, our usual method of operation is that we prepare the decision fairly quickly, and we substantially beat that target. So stay tuned. It won't be long. We're not going to make you wait forever for a decision. It should come within the next week, if not within the next few days. So thank you very much for everybody for your attendance and for your participation in this process. It's now the board's duty to consider all that we've heard and come to a decision on this matter. So I'm going to, we're going to close this hearing now, and wish you all a good day. Okay. As for the board members gathered, We have a separate link that we'll all tune into. Given that it's 3:38, now 3:39, why don't we all try to come back about 3:45? Well, actually, let's make it 10 to 4, 3:50. So we can take a personal needs break, stretch our legs, and get some fresh air, and then we'll come back on that other link that Jolene sent us this afternoon. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.